In the world of watch repair and restoration, oftentimes we come across watch hands where the finish has been damaged either by moisture or mishandling. And this presents us with a very unique challenge. How do we restore a part that is extremely fragile, and what kind of coating can we apply thin enough so that the hands don't interfere with each other, while at the same time adding some protection to whatever kind of metal the hand is made from? Well, today I'm not only going to show you a couple of different examples of how you can polish hands, but I'm going to show you an easy process to make brass hands look vintage as well. Okay, now if you're working on a modern movement, new hands can just be sourced for a direct replacement. But in vintage watches, either the replacement hands are not available in the same style that you want, the correct size that you need, or you just want to keep the hands original to the watch. For the most part, watch hands are made out of either steel or brass. And as you probably already know, hands made from steel can be blued by heating the hands up to somewhere between 540 degrees Fahrenheit to 590 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the color you're actually going for. This bluing process is not only beautiful to look at, but it's a classic finish. And not only does it make it look beautiful, but it also protects the steel from corrosion. But brass can't be blued. So what can we do with it? The first thing that comes to most people's mind is electroplating, which could be an option for some situations, but there's already plenty of videos on the tube on how to do that, so I'm not going to cover electroplating in this video. But regardless of whether you're going to be bluing a set of steel hands or even electroplating brass, you still need to be able to polish them. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a set of hands that are completely flat, then the easiest way to polish them is with a bolt tool. This is typically used for applying a black polish to steel screws, but you can also use it for polishing any part that is flat. This is something that I'll be covering in depth in my polishing lesson in my watch repair course. But most watch hands aren't completely flat, so how do you polish these without tearing them up? To be able to polish these hands without damaging them, we're going to secure them to a clean bench block with shellac. Now, I have found the easiest way to do this is by using liquid shellac, which is just shellac that's been dissolved in denatured alcohol, and applying a small amount to the bench block, and then laying the hands on top of it, and then putting it in a dryer to evaporate the alcohol, which hardens the shellac, securing the hands onto the block. Here's a set of brass hands from my part bin, which we're going to first polish to a high gloss, and then we're going to apply a dark finish and then protect them from tarnishing. Now, to begin with, I like to start with 1000 grit wet dry sandpaper. This step is not always necessary. It really depends on the condition and the amount of scratching on the hands. Next, I'm just going to take a soft toothbrush and some warm water mixed with a little bit of Dawn detergent to clean off the hands under running water to remove any sanding grit, and then I'm just going to pat it dry. Then we're going to do 2 stages of polishing with a soft cotton buff and a rotary tool. If you don't have a rotary tool, you can just flatten out the end of a piece of pegwood and use that to polish the metal. For polishing, I like to use Dialux brand polishing compounds. For brass, I start with the yellow compound to remove the bulk of the scratches, being very careful at the tip of the hand. Then I go through the cleaning process again with the toothbrush and soapy water to remove any grit, and again, pat it dry. For the final polish, I then move to the blue grit until all the previous scratches left over from the yellow grit are removed, and then I clean off the hands one more time. Now, if your goal is to use polished brass for your hand set, it's just a matter of applying the protective coating on it to protect it from tarnishing, which we'll cover in just a minute. But in this example, I want to change the color of the brass. So we're going to start by taking it back to a more satin finish by using a Scotch-Brite wheel and lightly going over the hand again. Now, once the hands have been Scotch-Brited, it's just a matter of soaking the block in denatured alcohol to soften up the shellac enough to release the hands from the block. Once the hands are removed, then I go over it with some fresh denatured alcohol to remove any remaining shellac left on the backside of the hand. Once the hands have been cleaned up, I'm going to hold the hand on a toothpick on another bench block. Now, the product that we're going to use to darken the hands is called brass black. When brass black is applied to either brass, copper, or bronze, it creates a chemical reaction that turns the brass dark, similar to the color of oil rub bronze, if you're familiar with that finish. Apply the brass black with a small Q-tip and leave the liquid on the hand for 60 seconds. Now, any excess finish left on the surface of the hand is removed by dipping the hands in deionized water, which has 0 minerals in it, or you can even use a good quality distilled water. I then put it in my dryer for a couple minutes to allow the brass black to completely dry. And then before applying another coat, rub the hands lightly with a clean Q-tip. If any of the coating wipes off, then you know that your brass wasn't clean enough, and you should just start over and make sure this time that the brass is completely clean. Okay, now once that's dry, it's time to add our protective coating to the finish. The product that I'm going to use to protect the metal, no matter whether it's the polished brass or these hands, which we have darkened, is called Renaissance wax polish. Now, if you're not familiar with this polish, it was actually developed specifically for conservation work, protecting everything from metal to photographs, historically significant paintings, and furniture. And it's used to protect priceless artifacts in the finest museums and collections in the world. So basically, if it's good enough for them, then it's good enough for what we're doing. Just be aware that this formula, this wax, is completely different from any paste wax you would buy at a hardware store, as it's chemically neutral, which is basically why they can use it on paintings that are over 500 years old, as well as priceless antiques. The key to working with it, though, is to remember that the thinner the application, the better. I start by just rubbing my finger over the wax to pull up a very small film, and then I just wipe it over the hand. Since this wax dries almost immediately, I just use a clean cotton buff, and I use it to buff out the wax on the hand. But remember, if you apply too much, it really makes it a lot harder to polish, so it's better to use very light coats and then just build up the finish coat after coat until you're happy with it. And here you can see what a light colored dial would look like with polished brass hands versus the hands that we just restored. For our second example today, I'm going to take a set of modern electroplated and loomed hands, and we're going to apply the same finish to these hands. So why would you even want to do that? Well, for one, it's a great look, especially if you have a light colored dial or if nickel plating doesn't give you the amount of contrast that you want. Okay, so we're going to start by removing the loom using denatured alcohol and a scratch brush. With the loom removed, we can apply our hands onto the bench block with the same shellac method that I just showed you a few minutes ago. To remove the existing plating on the hands, I'm going to switch to a little bit more aggressive compound, the Dialux Orange. I'm just using a fine, hard felt tip in my rotary tool, and we're going to lightly go over the hand until the nickel finish is removed. I'm going to clean the hands and block off with my toothbrush and soapy water, lightly go over it with my Scotch-Brite wheel, and repeat the cleaning process. Now I can remove the hand from the block, cleaning off any excess shellac and fit it onto the toothpick to hold it while we go through the same process again for applying the brass black. Waiting 60 seconds, swishing it around in deionized water, drying it, and repeating the process until I'm happy with the color. Now, once I'm happy with the finished color, it's just a matter of picking the intensity and color of our loom and applying it to the hands. Now, I won't go through my entire process for looming hands, other than to say that I use multiple thin coats instead of one thick coat. This method produces brighter loom results. Now, after allowing the loom to completely dry, I then apply the Renaissance wax to the top of the hands and polish it out just like before. Because this wax is chemically neutral, it does not affect the loom at all.